CKSON, the captain of the media unit for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. There was a high-profile crash last week that resulted in a critical injury of a 5-year-old. I did want to take just a moment to give an update on the condition of the child, who is still in critical condition. With that being said, the reason that I wanted to talk today is a couple of things. Number one, that is still under investigation, and we will not be able to discuss that particular situation in any way, shape, or form. I'm probably not going to take any questions over that. I understand that you guys have a job to do, and we understand that this is a newsworthy event, and we want to be as transparent as possible without jeopardizing an ongoing investigation. With that being said, we have given some updates as to how these investigations generally come out, and I have invited one of our traffic investigator supervisors, Sergeant Bill Mahoney, who today is his 32nd year on the police department. He's been investigating these types of crashes for the past 13 years, or leading those investigations for the past 13 years. And he can generally speak about what goes into an investigation like this. Those things, as I have communicated with most of you, these things generally take weeks to investigate. And we've brought some of the equipment to kind of discuss why that takes so long and how that takes so long, and kind of the process of what goes into investigating this. So before we get going any further, does anybody have any questions about that part of it? I'm going to let Bill step up here, Sergeant Mahoney, step up here and kind of talk about how these investigations go.
Bill Mahoney, Billmahoney. As Captain Jackson said, I'm a sergeant with KCPD Accident Investigation. Typically, our investigators will come out directly to the scene. They'll be called on anything where we would consider to be a major crash being those resulting in death or life-threatening injury. Our investigators will get out there, start marking evidence, look at the nature of the crash, call whatever resources they feel is necessary based on the particular crash. They may call detectives in, they may call commercial vehicle inspectors or officers from the DUI squad if they need a specimen. The crash investigators identify the evidence themselves, photograph the scene, either mark the evidence, or they will start to create a forensic map right then and there while they're at the scene. They will then later on revisit the vehicles at the tow lot, conduct full examinations of the damaged vehicles. If there's any kind of download information to be obtained from the airbag or power modules of the vehicles, they'll handle that. The detectives will be talking to any witnesses, obtaining any court orders that we might need for evidence, and they will ultimately put the case file together. Typically, a reconstruction, which is our end of it, it takes anywhere from 30 to 60 days, just depending on the amount of work that needs to be done and depending on the speed with which we can get things like lab results. The specimens are drawn, as I said, from DUI officers. That's submitted to an independent lab. We'll continue to work ahead on the physical aspects of the crash and then mesh everything together. So it's a multidisciplinary approach to these types of incidents where different elements are performing different functions, and for that reason it's very typical that it takes a long period of time relative to other types of investigations.
Sergeant, what's maybe the most time-consuming aspect of an investigation, of a major crash investigation?
Well, sometimes the longest you can wait is for the lab results, but in terms of the labor-intensive side of it, oftentimes it's creating the forensic map, which is shot with a total station similar to this unit here, or a GPS system, and we have to mark all points of evidence and create a 2-scale map, and that'll be the basis for any kind of speed calculation. It's very methodical, it's very time consuming, because the emphasis is on getting it right, obviously.
Sure. And how tricky is that element of it, the photographing the map, say in a situation where you're on a high-speed, high-traffic highway? It's not a typical street corner.
Very much so. Good question. That's why, when possible, oftentimes we'll render the map while we've got the street closed or the roadway closed. If we have the GPS available and the conditions are right to do it, we can oftentimes shoot that map while we're working the scene so we don't have to disrupt traffic later. We have a reflectorless feature on the total station that will oftentimes let us shoot off the road, shoot a laser onto the road so traffic can pass without any disruption. Sometimes neither of those is an option, and you have to actually block traffic at a later time.
And one last thing for you, Sergeant. How often does, in a crashing investigation, if it happens at all, that video images that are on the body camera of an officer that's responding, does that get folded into the evidence in the investigation?
More and more as the technology still evolving. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's part of it, it may or may not be included in a case file every time. It just depends on the circumstances of the crash and what evidence is captured on the video. But yeah, that's something we always do.
I've got a couple questions. I don't know if you can answer or not.
Sure.
If you can, that's cool. Coach Reid told us yesterday that Britt Reid had surgery. Can you guys tell us what sort of surgery or injury?
Honestly, just to reemphasize, I'm not part of the investigative team on the Reid crash, so I may, if you guys have.
What sort of injury it was that he had to have a surgery for? Was he?
I want to, I'll take this moment to say a couple of things and to reiterate. Can't talk anything about this crash. We have not released any names of anybody involved in this. Some of that has come from the organization, and there's another thing that as I'm talking about that real quick, some people have referred to a police report that they have gotten. That is a court document for a search warrant that did not come from us. We can't release any information about this case. It's still under investigation. So
right.
Thank you, and I understand the question. But
I've got a general question. On one of those things that I read, which was from the search warrant thing, it said that the person had, when they hit the computer, had popped up for some interactions, I guess, with police on DUI things. Is that something that is a Kansas City thing, or is there a whole metro-wide thing where all those things go together? This is not about this case, but just generally, if you're on a DUI stop or whatever, and you call in, does the computer come back and say, yeah, this guy's had an interaction with the police? How does that go in a computer?
we have access to criminal history when we pull somebody over through our computer.
But is that not just a Kansas City?
I'll leave it at that. We can pull up people's police record from our vehicle.
So if you get stopped and you don't get a ticket, you can still be in the system as you had an encounter with police, right?
I appreciate the question. I just don't want to get into those details.
When you guys believe that impairment is a factor in a crash investigation, do you backtrack to see where that person may have been consuming alcohol or drugs, or do you just rely on toxicology?
It just depends on the specifics of a particular case, if that makes sense. If it's pertinent to the criminal charge, maybe, but typically, I haven't seen them go that far very often.
And then does the location of where a crash happens, such as maybe you're a highway, limit your ability to conduct an investigation as opposed to if it's on a street or on a less traveled road?
I wouldn't say it limits it, it's a consideration. What we're going to do what we have to do. I mean, we get one shot at getting it completely right, and we will always do that on our terms. We may cause more disruption on like a limited access highway than we would on a side street. We're going to put the highest emphasis on obtaining the evidence we need so that we can arrive at a correct investigative conclusion. So, yeah, it can be more problematic, but we take measures to make sure that we get the time we need to do it right and we can do it safely.
And speaking of time, since it does take a lot of time if so, how is it?
The backlog, like the totality of all of our investigations?
Well, for traffic accidents, things like, especially when you're investigating crashes like the one we're talking about.
We work hard to make sure the lead investigator has all the time he needs to move fluidly through the case from start to finish. We typically won't call on an investigator to handle other cases until they've completed that first one. If they do get another one, sometimes, like last year, we had 103 fatalities and probably twice as many of serious injury cases as that. So there are times where they can stack up, but our investigators are very good at managing their time and making sure each case gets the proper attention.
When you talk about blood lab work taking a long time, sometimes that's the longest thing you're waiting on. Are there instances where one case will jump to the front of the line in the lab, or do they always just do it as?
Yeah, sorry, I have no idea what the protocols are there. We submit it, we get it. That's really all I know. Sorry.
Do you have any recommendations for anybody who maybe has any car troubles, especially in an area where it could be a highway? What the best sort of action they should take?
I'm sorry, could you, I didn't hear that.
If somebody's car is having issues, they're on maybe a highway, kind of like a stretch of road, like the one we're talking about. Any recommendations for what they should do, especially if it's at night?
Boy, I'll tell you why that's tough. Is because I feel like it's so general, and it depends so much on the specifics of where you are and what type of trouble you're having, that if I were to just give a blanket statement, I'd be afraid that could appear to be a criticism of somebody's action in a specific case. Sometimes you don't have a lot of great choices. Depending on where your car stops running, sometimes it just stops where it stops. You may be in an area where you can get completely off the road. You may not be, and it's hard. I mean, you do whatever you can to make your car as visible to oncoming traffic if you're partially in a lane, but again, it depends on the configuration of the roadway. Is there a curve? Is there a rise? It's just. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not really able to specifically address that.
Speaking to the location of the accident, earlier reports said it was on the entrance ramp from Stadium Drive onto 435, but then also it mentioned Eastwood Traffic Way. So just kind of a little confusion there. Can you give us more specifics?
To be specific again, we cannot discuss a specific accident. This is just general background information about how a traffic investigation would go, and an experienced person, but we cannot discuss anything specific about a specific case. It is our duty and our responsibility to present a clean case file to the prosecutor, and we want justice for this little girl, and we want the criminal justice system to work properly, and so we just can't specifically talk about that. I appreciate the question, though. Does anybody have anything else, a specific for the investigatory part? What I'd like to do is, for those of you that have cameras, we have one of our accident investigators that is very knowledgeable of this. If you guys want to kind of end the briefing portion of this, if you want to get some pictures of some of the equipment and ask some specific questions about that, I'm happy to take any more questions if you guys want something more personalized, but if nobody else has anything else specific, we can move on to just that aspect of it. Thank you, guys.